Welcome back, everybody, to the Innovative Agency. Sharon Torek here with you, and I'm looking forward to today's conversation. Um, our guest is somebody who I have wanted to have on the show actually for quite a while because he has spent a lot of time around agencies and the agency industry and really has a great grasp on the financial landscape and the accounting landscape for agencies. And um, we have just, as we're recording this today, wrapped up a year. We're starting a new year fresh. And by the time you're hearing this, it's probably we're going to be well into Q1, maybe even close to Q2. And so let's talk about agencies by the numbers and how everything that's going on in your world as an agency owner or leader might be a little bit different, might feel or look a little bit different than it did 24 months ago in terms of metrics and profit and business modeling and pricing. So let's get into it.
That
And
was great.
I can't think of a better person, Jody Grunden, than you to have this conversation with. Let's start with your firm. You have been in the agency world for a long time, and currently you're running the practice over at Anders Virtual CFO that
Hmm.
touches the agency space, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we started we started virtual CFO services way back about 25 years ago. And we started focusing on agencies probably 10 to 12 years within the practice. We've been doing it for quite some time.
Yeah.
And man, the growth over that time has been amazing, not only for us, but for agencies in general. And
Hmm.
the changes obviously are really similar to what we see in the accounting industry, which is kind of ironic. What's happened in growth, what's happened with AI, the outlook for accounting industry versus the outlook for agency world. It's all really kind of parallel in nature. So it'll be kind of fun talking today about, the different things and, some of the things that we've introduced along the way, like subscription-based billing or pricing, flat fee pricing. We've got away from the hourly bill. That kind of thing is going to be kind of fun to talk to because I think it's going to hit more and more in the agency world over the next few years than what people had thought, just a couple of years back. And so it'll be a fun
Yeah.
conversation for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. So let's start there since you went there
Okay.
with the pricing component of the numbers for
Hmm.
agencies because I think that traditionally, and you and I have spent a lot of time being agency adjacent as advisors, right?
Yep.
And
That's exactly right.
the traditional metrics for evaluating growth, progress, success um, are have not really evolved that much, but the ways that you get there feel like are completely shaken upside down by the way the industry has evolved with technology. Specifically, let's talk first about because I can't record an episode of the show without saying A and I next to each other. So let's talk about first of all, but specifically as to revenue generation and pricing modeling,
Sure, sure.
because and I agree with you that there's complete parallels between our agency friends and what you and I are probably both experiencing as professional services firms of the
Hmm.
accounting or the legal variety. But
Hmm.
our listeners here are running agencies, and so let's talk about them. And what kind of conversations are you having right now with your agency clients about how they need to be thinking about how they scope and price their work, given the fact that AI is infiltrating every part of the delivery pathway for the work itself between agency and client.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the big thing is that we all know that if you use AI effectively, you can get things done a lot quicker, faster, and do a great job. But AI doesn't give that personal touch, doesn't give that consulting that a lot of companies really need. And so you've got to be able to value price your service to a point that you can actually achieve a high profit margin at the same time being able to deliver that service. 'Cause what's going to happen is that if you stay with the traditional hourly bill, you're going to be completing the project a lot quicker, faster, and your bill is going to come down in numbers or dollar amounts. If you can handle that, great. But for most people, that's going to be a tough one. So you've got to be able to figure out how can we price things differently? How can we price things so that we can get the margins that we need to run a successful business? And so, with what we had done a long time ago is we've been trying to get with our clients to move to a subscription-based billing. Oh, geez, for a long time because we've been doing it for 20 years in the accounting, for Summit, we've been doing it and trailblazing the accounting industry for that same thing. And we got the same pushback. Accountants didn't want to do it either. They thought hourly bill is the way to go, and still the majority of firms out there do hourly bill, which is
Mhm.
the same thing that we're seeing in the agency role. A majority of firms started with the hourly bill and they're there. Now that you're seeing a gradual shift now to where flat fee is coming in. You have to be careful with flat fee because flat fee doesn't scale. And so flat fee is whatever it is. And so you want to make sure that you've got a scaling component if you do any type of flat fee, which kind of gets to that value base that everybody's talking about. And value base can be defined in many different ways. It can be what the perception that the client's getting for the work out there, which is really hard to determine. That's the Blair Ends method. Or it can be more like a Ron Baker method where it's a replacement of a service. So what would it replace to put a CMO on staff or to do, something of that nature? So that's what you're looking at. How can we create that value? How can we, substitute a price for value? And that's, and then once we've done that, then how do we get paid for that service is the other thing. Do we get paid for it? Now that we priced it and it's locked in, do we have to wait an invoice or can we get paid for it directly? Which is kind of interesting, because you're not changing the dollar like you would an hourly bill because the dollar is known. So can we get that payment a lot quicker? And that's going to be one of the challenges that, or I guess not really challenges, but that's one of the goals I would say, or one of the nuggets, for everyone here is once you've got the value determined, you can get the price, you can get that you can get the cash really at any point in time. And so, for instance, a subscription-based billing model, which is what we've been using for 20 plus years, that's, we get paid every single Monday. And so we get paid on a weekly basis for whatever that period of time that we're locking that client is, working with us, whether it's a ongoing relationship where you get paid until they say no, or whether it's a project relationship where you're getting, paid and at the end of the deal, then you fall off in the sunset. So it really creates a lot of opportunities to get your money quicker. It creates a lot of opportunities to know what that dollar amount is, so you can plan a lot better. And it's great for the client because they know what the dollar amount is too. So there's no surprises. They can budget and plan better. So I think pricing is, moving from an hourly bill to a subscription base or a value base or a flat fee, whatever you want to call it, is going to be hugely beneficial, not only for us in the agency world, but also the clients are going to love it as well.
So walk me through the way you coach an agency owner about actually practically making a transition. Let's take for an example, an agency that does a lot of project work, right? Because
Yep.
let's let's put aside retainers and what we used to call AOR relationships, although that
hmm
term is still used in the industry, but I don't think it means what it used to mean.
Right.
So let's assume an agency is doing a lot of project work and they're developing their pricing based upon some internal metric of what they need to meet their profit goals, et cetera, and they come up with a number.
hmm
How then, what should they be thinking? How should they be thinking differently in terms of how to calculate profitable pricing, and
Yep.
then how they should be having that conversation with their clients, the brands, about why pricing that way makes sense for everybody. Because I think it's as much a communication or a sales problem when it comes to pricing, which is somewhat confidence related, maybe, but as it
Yeah.
is a profitability question. So,
Mhm.
how do you walk an agency owner through some of these questions?
Yeah, I think the way that we price things on a project basis would be really analyzing the data. Data tells you everything. And so I've always preached that although we've never billed by the hour, we track hours and we track hours to determine pricing, profitability, what where mistakes are happening. There's a lot of great things that can come out of doing based by tracking your time. So I'm a huge proponent of tracking time. Love it. And what we do is we take that data and we look for consistency between different projects. So that the longer you've been in business, the easier this is going to be for you. Because
Mhm.
you'll have 10 different projects, 100 different projects that you've done very similar that you can look back and say, hey, here's the margin that we had on this, here's what worked and here's what didn't work. And you can go through each one of those different projects. So there's a lot of analysis going on. And with that, you can come up and say, hey, for us to get a 75% net contribution margin, meaning that we have to have 25% direct cost in that, which is the salary, the benefits, all of the burden involved in
Yeah.
there as the cost factor, 75% profit. That numbers magically flows down to 50% gross profit, magically flows down to a 25% net income. If you can focus on that number on each of your projects and then come up with that flat fee, and then go back and determine why, if we do it for this type of deal, why did we not get that same profit margin for this deal? And so you want to look for differentials. What was different from that one versus this
Mhm.
one, so that when you go into price, you'll know that, hey, if the sky is blue, here's we're going to price this one. If the sky is green, we're going to price it this way. And so you can be very transparent. And the idea then is that you want to create your model so that I can price it, you can price it, Sharon, and everybody else can price it. We're going to get the same price. It's not
Mhm.
going to fluctuate based on who the sales rep is, because that's another issue. You might have a sales rep that is pricing with a high margin, one with a low margin, and then you're flat fee and you're stuck with whatever that agreement is. So you've got to come up with something that is transferable between people on the team and super easy so that they can actually present this to a client and the client can pick levers. Like when we price our services, it's very similar. So we'll have different buckets. We'll have the service level bucket, we'll have the accounting bucket, we'll have the tax bucket, and then between there, we're going to have different things within there, itemized things. And by choosing different items, boom, the price fluctuates. Now, that's kind of a flat fee, but when we scale it based on revenue size, because we determine that sky is red, sky is blue, that revenue is the key driver for us. The bigger the agency, the more that we're going to be involved in that agency. Same thing with clients. The bigger the client, the more you're going to be involved in it. The more the different role that you might have in the client, the different it could be the fluctuation between
Mhm.
what your levers are to scale up and down. So you want to look at what's profitable, find out why it's profitable, kind of go back through your research, find out why it's profitable, look at the last 3 years of data, and then with that, you should be able to come up with a fairly easy bucket on, hey, here's how we can price these 5 common services, whatever they are, something that I know what it is, something the client would know what it is, something that our team would know what it is. And so that it's super easy that when we go into a sales call, we're just punching levers. Hey, you want this? Great, here's the price. Hey, you want this? This is the price. And you just really work with the client on that. And the client loves it because they can see the transparency. They also love it because they can pick their own venture. You're not haggling about it's too much or too less. Can you discount it? You're not haggling about any of that stuff. You're going
Mhm.
and allowing them to pick what works best for them and then pick what doesn't work for them. If they don't want to spend $300,000 for that project and they want to spend 250, they're moving levers with you to come up with that 250 and boom, it's there. It's super nice. And the clients always walk away with it saying, that was a cool experience. Never had that before. Usually it goes into this black box. You get the information, goes into the black box. You come back a couple days later, you shoot them something through an email or whatever, and the client looks at it like, how did you come up with this? And then they compare it to other things. And when they compare it to other things, they don't know if they're comparing apples to apples. They could be comparing apples to oranges and never know it. And you might
Mhm.
lose or win a deal based on that. And so what this allows you to do, it allows the client to be in control and pick what works for them. That's how you create a really easy pricing structure, and it works well. But the key there is 75% net contribution margin. The other key is once it's in place, doesn't mean that that's what it is forever. What that means is that now you're looking at your projects on a holistic basis and you're comparing every single month. Hey, is this project going well? Am I doing something right or wrong? And you're taking really notes, really paying attention to the actual projects that you have open. And then at the end of it, you make your assessment. Yeah, hey, this worked out great. Love it. Let's, everything worked out well. Or man, when we did this XYZ part of this project, it just was really horrible, and we lost our butt on that. So the next time we do that, maybe we go to our pricing model and we shift it up. If we ever do XYZ, we're going to charge a more of a premium on it the next time because we know that, hey, that's where we're leaking money. And then you just continue on, continue on, continue on. So it's an ongoing process. Because
Right.
believe me, what we charged a long time ago when we were losing money through a flat fee, because we were, even an accounting firm, you think about it, it's like, wow, these guys are really great with, well, we lost money too, because we always thought we could do things faster and better than what we actually did it. It took us forever. We spent more time with it. We loved our clients. And boy, that flat fee margin went away. Whereas what this does, it allows you to actually figure all that in there and come up with a price that works really well for the client and then also works well for your margins. It's really a win-win situation if you do it right.
All right, so I have so much to ask you about. Thank, that was an incredible walkthrough, which had a couple of different steps, and I don't want to lose the
Mhm.
thread for
Sure.
everybody who's listening here. So this is a combination of pricing the client, not just the work, right?
Yep.
Which is a very Blair Enns concept. He's talked
100%.
about this for years.
Yep.
So this is a combination of taking a look at the client profile, um, and then knowing your numbers internally, as you pointed out, what it
Yep.
costs you to actually deliver the service. And you
hmm
get to that by having data over time
Yep.
about what it's cost you to service a particular type of work.
hmm
And for you agencies listening who are specialists and or who have niche, this is easier for you, I would think,
hmm
because you're doing a lot of the same kinds of projects,
Yep.
over a period of time. And so you should have some data. And then the twist you put in there, Jody, which I really love, is the choose your own adventure part of it, which is
Yep.
okay, if you are client profile A, let's say that because of their revenue, they're a blue sky, to use your
Yep.
analogy.
Yep.
Um, Here's your entry button into the adventures that you can choose.
Yep.
You fit profile, B, you're a green sky. These are your adventures to choose. And then the agency and the brand decide together what the work scope should be based on the client's resources and the agency's determination of what its profitability is for doing.
That's exactly right. And
Yeah.
then you have the scaling button inside. Like for us, we determined that revenue size was our scaling. That was what created that value.
Are there others? Are there other entry buttons
Oh, there could be a
other
lot of
than
different things. It could be the role that you're playing. Maybe if you're assuming a like a CMO role or something like that as a
okay.
client, well, that's easy. You've got a bigger role. If you're assuming that, hey, it's just a lower level role where they just want you to do some lower end stuff. Well, maybe that's a different role. So you've got to figure out when you go through your data, everybody's going to be a little different. So when you go through your data, you got to figure out why something was profitable versus why it wasn't profitable. Why didn't it hit that 75% gross profit margin? And so there's
Mhm.
something that's different in this project that was different in this identical project. What was it? Was it something that they were a bigger company? Oh, was it, what was it, was it blue? Was it red? That type of thing. So you've got to do a lot of analysis and kind of look backwards and see, hey, why was this profitable versus this one? And once you
Okay.
figured that out, then you can figure out, hey, this is how we're going to scale it. Hey, if we got this company that we always have this, they've got 1,000 people in their company. Well, then we know that, hey, we're going to be it's going to be we're going to have to scale it based on people, or
Okay.
how many people do they have in their marketing department? How many people do they have? How many projects are we going to do at the same time for this company? How quick do they want their turnaround to be? Do they want their turnaround to be week? Do we have time to do the turnaround, or do they want it quicker? Well, that's a scaling thing. Hey, we want it quicker. Boom, we need to increase the price for that because we're going to have to put more resources right away. So, there's a lot of different things that you want to make sure that when you're going through it, that you figure out why it wasn't profitable and why it was profitable. Then once you've determined that, then you've got your scaling.
Right. Well, it also sounds to me though, like in addition to knowing your own data as an agency and having a good command or good access to your historical data about what your experience in the past has been, it sounds like there needs to be some specific intelligence gathering about the client or the
Hmm.
potential client before you scope the work out or price, I should say price the work, right? Because you need to know some things about their perspective on what this is worth to them, what it might mean to their bottom line. So, do you advocate to your clients for like a more assertive intake of a client of a potential new piece of business, or is there additional intelligence gathering that you feel like an agency needs to do so that it can determine how to present options to the client?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, a couple different things. So one, you've got to determine if there's going to be a lever in there to determine, how much value are they getting. Then that's a hard lever. That's what Blur Ends tells you. You really need to figure that out. That's
Hmm.
super hard to figure out because you just don't know for a
Yeah.
lot of folks. So is that going to be part of the scaling process? And if it's not, then let's not even worry about it. If it is, let's figure out how to actually figure that out. Because
Hmm.
there's got to be a subjective way of figuring it out, or without an objective way of figuring it out, without actually going through and just guessing and hoping, that sort of thing. But then once you do that, you've got to create and we have a pricing calculator that we created super easy. I would say super easy. For the most people on this, it'd be super easy for the most people listening to this to create a similar calculator. But the calculator should have the levers in there to adjust for on the fly, different things. For instance, for a couple things that we have. So I would say probably 60% of all of our clients are agency clients. We do have law clients. We do have some construction clients that are outside that bucket. And so with our pricing calculator is designed so that if it's a construction client, I just flip it over, hit construction, and all my parameters are construction based. If it's a law client, same thing. If it's an agency client, same thing. So going into the deal, and you could think of it many different ways, but going into the deal, I might not have to know as much about a client, but I got to be on my toes and asking specific questions to make sure that we're delivering a price, for their type of service. Are they, PPC type of client, or whatever that might be. You've got to figure that into that. And so, yeah, one, if you're to answer your question, if you're going to actually use what value they're going to get from it, great idea. You just have to figure out how to make that, take out the subjective part about it. If you're going to forget about that alone and say, hey, the value that we're bringing is here in us internally, because we're going to help you get the best product or best service that you can have because we are great. Then I wouldn't worry about that. I'm worrying about, hey, how can we price it now so that the client has control of the price? Because we want the client to have control and make it so that again, it's a win-win for both of us.
Hmm. All right. I've got one more pricing related question I want to ask you, and then there's lots
Mhm.
of other stuff that I want to talk about,
Absolutely.
um, related to financial fundamentals for agencies. So,
Mhm.
my last pricing focused question for this conversation is, if you had a crystal ball right now, do you think, based on what you're seeing agencies experience right now and the numbers that you're looking at, is the presence of AI going to be more likely to help them open up opportunity for profitability, or is it more likely to put pressure on them to lower prices because
Mhm.
clients demand that because of perception? Where do you
That- that's
think
a,
agencies are going to net out on
yeah,
that?
that's a great question because we were talking about this offhand. It's for those people that believe that it's going to help you, it'll help you. For those people that believe it's going to hurt you, it'll hurt you.
Oh, it's a mindset answer from an accountant. I
It's a
love it.
100% mindset, 100%.
Okay. Tell me
Because
more.
we have the same thing in the accounting world. Hey, shoot, it's going to replace all accounting jobs. It's going to replace all design jobs. It's going to
Lawyer
replace
jobs.
all
Yeah.
lawyer jobs.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's a tool, and your job is going to shift. Your roles are going to change, but it's a tool to help you do things better and provide a better experience for your client. Because in the
Mhm.
end, that's what your job is, to provide that experience for your client. And internally, because of that, then you make money. If you
Mhm.
can't, it's not the other way around. It's not, hey, I got to make money and the client's going to get whatever they get. No, and AI is going to be that tool to help you get to that level. And for those that embrace it right now, which there's a lot of firms out there that are embracing the heck out of right now, they've got a head start right now. And they're seeing a lot of good things happening with it. So
Are
do
you
I
seeing
see?
their margins actually improve already?
Absolutely, they're seeing the
Okay.
margins improve because what they're doing is most of them are not losing people. They're just growing without having to add people, which is
Mhm.
great. That's the ideal thing. Looking back to what we do, because we use AI all the time, and we've been using it for a while. We've grown about $4 million without adding one person. Kind of cool. Just over this last year and a half, 2 years. And so, it's going to really help because you're actually providing a higher level service now for the client, and you're using a tool that's going to help you do that. Could you go the other way and say, you know what, hey, we're going to lower the price and we're going to let people go? You could go that route if you wanted to, but your margin would still be the same. So you're going
Yeah.
to have a lot of, but now you're going to have a lot of smaller client or
Will it though? It'll be the same temporarily until you race to the bottom and then
yeah,
you'll have many
the
options.
percentage will be the same, but you're going to have a bazillion clients then. So you have to figure that out. Do you want 100 clients or do you want, 10?
Yeah.
That's going to be the thought. And, 100% agree with you, Sharon. I am definitely not the one that wants 100 clients versus 10. I want to work
Mhm.
with 10 solid clients versus, having a ton. So
Yeah,
do I
I
think
mean
it's going to
I
help you?
agree. I think agencies would agree too. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of the experience and the profitability is part of that for sure, but
Yeah.
it's
Well, you're
also
seeing the same
working.
thing in law, right? I mean, you're seeing the same question
Oh,
happens with
100%. I mean,
lawyers. Yeah.
it's yeah, you want obviously you have to be profitable to stay in business, but nobody wants to work with a client who's a jerk. And so
Yep.
we have a no jerk policy here at the firm, and we have awesome clients because of it.
Hmm.
Nobody wants to work with a client that doesn't see the value that they're bringing to the table. And so successful agencies do a good job of demonstrating that. And they work with clients who acknowledge it, right? So it's
Yep.
all these um, well, I was hoping that was going to be your answer because I feel the same way, and I do think it's a mindset question.
Hmm.
It is, you need to be in the mindset of using it as a tool to get you where you're going, and how you communicate to the world about how you do business as a result of the tool. We're all agencies, folks. You can figure
Yep.
out a good communication strategy or story to tell about the work. At
Mhm.
least you should be able to be.
More so
Um,
than really accountants or lawyers for sure.
yeah,
Hmm.
right, right, exactly so.
Hmm.
Um, all right. So we've talked a lot about pricing, and that was a really the choose your own adventure part of it was a real eye opener for me. So that's I need to think more about that. Maybe I'll have to have you back to grill you some more on that one,
There you
Jody.
go. Be happy to
But
help.
you talk to a lot of agency owners about their numbers,
Hmm.
and about dollars and cents. What do you think that the opportunities missed for most agencies are when it comes to increasing their profitability? What are the things that you think they're most likely to either overlook or not be vigilant enough about? That could be simple shifts they could make
Hmm.
now so that 2026 is closer to goal than it would be if they didn't pay attention to those things.
Yeah, I would say, and again, here's another philosophical thing. I'd say you really need to be intentional and not reactive. And when I say that, there's a lot, and I'll explain that a little bit better. But the folks that are intentional with it, they've got a nice cash reserve. They've got a 10% of their annualized revenue in the bank sitting there, helping them make decisions. And it's kind of funny. How's cash making decisions for you? Well, cash
Mhm.
makes a lot of decisions for you, and it allows you to make the right decision. So what
Mhm.
happens is when in cash, let's say 10% is my number. 10% is really about 2 months worth of expenses for the agency world. So if you take your top line revenue, let's say it's $1 million, you want to have $100,000 of cash in the bank at all times. Something that you can use. And there's a formula that goes with it. I'm not going to bore you to death with accounting formulas, but that's the simple math. If you wanted 6 months worth of expenses in the bank, you want 30%. So again, simple math again, $1 million company, $300,000 in the bank. If you're a lot less riskier person, or company, that's what you want, $300,000. If you're moderately risky, maybe you want 20% in there. So you've got control over, how much that risk is, but you never want less than 10. Anything less than 10, you're reactive and you're a firefighter. And
Okay.
firefighters, it's just, you'll get burnt out and it's going to leave a ton of cash on the table, ton of profit on the table because you're going to make decisions based on gut reaction, super quick, not really a lot of thought into it because you don't have a lot of thought. You don't have a lot of time to make that decision. A
Mhm.
perfect example is during the pandemic. When we had clients come through that had a 10, 20, 30, some had even more money in reserves. And, with that, those clients, super successful. They were able to slow down. They were able to model many different scenarios. They would take a couple weeks to kind of figure out what they wanted to do. And then they made some decisions. And they also had opportunity buys in there too. They had opportunity hires. They had opportunity, firms that they could purchase. There's a lot of positive things because of that cash. It allowed that cash. Those firms that were reactive struggled because they were super emotional. Things were tight, a lot of stress, and they were making a lot of wrong decisions. Hey, let's fire half the people right now, and then all of a sudden they pick this job up. There's a lot of a lot of negatives that came with it, and so I would say what a lot of folks that we have seen and this goes way beyond AI. This is forever. If they don't have the cash in the bank, they tend to leave a lot of profit on the table. And the only way that you're going to build profit is have a solid dynamic forecast in place so you can see where you're going to go. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is a dynamic forecast is something that once you determine your goal, let's say you want that $300,000 and I only have 100 in the bank, what's it going to take for me to do that? Is it going to take if I increase price a little bit? If I change the pricing structure, is that going to help impact that top line revenue? What does that look like? Not only on the revenue and the profit margin side, but what does it look like on the cash side? So you have to look and see, hey, is it going to take me 12 months in order to build that cash to where I need it? If I hit these numbers, if I have these clients, if I do these things right, that's where that dynamic forecast is key. And you should be looking at it on a regular, reoccurring basis, meaning every single month that forecast gets touched. Once you close those books out, you should know, hey, how did my last month impact the future? In the future before last month, I was looking at having to borrow on line of credit in November. Well, now we had such a great month. Well, I don't need to do that. Now I'm going to have a little bit of profit there. And then we look at the next month. Oh, I'm exceeding expectations again. Are my assumptions correct? Do I need to actually increase things or decrease things? And how much money am I going to have in the bank now? And so that's where when you have that dynamic forecast, once you've identified the cash that you need, the dynamic forecast is huge on getting you to that and allowing you to really improve that bottom line, improve the profits, because now everything is very intentional on hitting a goal. Do you
Mhm.
want to actually sell your company in 3 years? Hey, what if you do? Great. What do you want? What kind of multiple do you want? Those are
Mhm.
the things that you're thinking of. Okay, if I have that multiple, what does my bottom line need to be in order to get that multiple? Oh, it
Yeah.
needs to be that dollar amount. Is that achievable? No, it's not achievable. So what does reasonable look like? Okay, reasonable looks like this. And so you're always adjusting things and you're actually training yourself how to actually run a business, but you're training yourself how to actually get to that goal and not be disappointed. Because we get a lot of folks that they get to that end line and they're like, hey, I want to sell my business. And it's like, then they go through due diligence and they've got to explain all these, weird hiccups in their financials and what doesn't work and why they were negative or what happened there. And then they get this offer and they're like super disappointed. And it's like,
Yeah.
but if they had it dialed in and they knew exactly what they're going for, what they're getting, they would know going into that, here's the offer I'm going to get. Do I want to go for that offer or do I want to, ride it a little longer and see if I can build it a little bit better? Or, I don't want to take any more risk. This AI thing bothers me. I am good to take money off the table now and be in it
Yeah.
for somebody. You
Well,
know,
yeah, well, and you and I were chatting a little offline. I do think that's what's driving a lot of the M&A acceleration in the agency space, is owners taking some chips off the table because um, they're not really sure they're up for another round of excitement. All right, so let me pull up one thread of what we just walked through in terms of metrics and reactiveness versus proactivity, because the theme of what you just shared was that it's obviously easier to make decisions from a position of strength and proactivity. For the agency owners and leaders who are out there listening right now, they don't have reserves.
Right.
They're not there.
Yep.
How do you coach an agency through, let's say they're at ground zero. Let's say they've
Hmm.
got no reserves or next to no
Yep.
reserves, and they want to at least work their way up to having a healthy number of months of reserves, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it might be.
Yep.
What are some of the steps that they should consider taking, or what's some of the data they should consider really scrutinizing so that they could start taking steps in the direction of putting the reserve together that will enable them to be more proactive versus reactive?
Yeah, great question. So let's say they're assuming nothing, no cash in the bank.
Yeah,
Maybe they have money on line of credit, and
yeah,
that's all they have, which is very common amongst really any service-based industry.
right.
That doesn't have that forecast. So the first thing I would do is make sure that your financials are in solid shape. Because if you don't have solid financials, you're going to make bad decisions because you're looking at data that's not right.
Mhm,
Do you really have a profit there, or is it negative because you put money in the wrong on the balance sheet or whatever that might be, and you're tricking
mhm,
yourself? So we're going to assume that your financials are in solid shape. That'd be number one step. The number two step is you've got to actually put this, you have to create this forecast. And the forecast is a month-to-month forecast. And it should show revenue coming in, expenses going out, net profit. But then you should also be able to flip it over and see what the cash looks like on a month by month basis, what your debt position looks like, what your AR looks like, AP, all of that will be on your what you call a balance sheet forecast. And so you have to build that there. There's software out there that'll help you do that.
mhm.
And with that, then you can tackle your stuff. Because like I said, if you don't have that goal out there, you're not going to you're going to be in the same position you were next year. It's just
Or
going to
you don't know what your levers are, right? If
yeah,
you
you have
don't
no
have
clue.
adequate data, you don't know what your levers are because
Yeah.
you might have them, or maybe you don't have a lever and you need to create one, right?
Yeah, because when I say, hey, oh, you got to increase your revenue by 10% next year, as a business owner, I'm like, okay, well, thanks. How do you do that? I have no idea how you do that.
Right.
But if you're talking about, and I use the analogy for a truck repair company, it's super easy analogy. I've got a client that, heck, for 25 years, all they did was repair semis. Semis would wreck, they'd repair semis, and they always had at least 10 semis coming in that they repaired. And then each semi was an average of $60,000. That's what their average ticket was. And so when I'm in the conversation with them, I'm talking about semis. I'm not talking about profit. How many semis are you coming in next month? Oh, we got six of them coming in next month. What do you have in inventory that you're going to actually be able to do the following month? Okay, here's the following month. Okay, what do you think is going to happen? You think it's going to be higher or lower next month based on that? Oh, it's going to be higher because we've got weather or whatever might be coming through. So we add a little bit to the next month's forecast. So now we're basing our forecast not on fictitious numbers that we just made up. We're forecasting it on things that we control. An agency controls a lot of things there. Figure out what you control. That's what you actually are counting there. And guess what? You flip it over and now you get numbers so that we can look at it and say, oh, based on that, we're going to have a $300,000 top line. We're going to have a $20,000 bottom line. What are we thinking? Yeah, great. And so what happens is the next month when we look at it, we got our financials done, we look at it, the conversation is, we missed our mark. We only had five trucks come through and you said 10. Is that a reoccurring thing? Do we need to adjust things or is that a one-time off? It was a
Hmm.
one-time off. Okay, great. So you think 10 this month and we go through that same process. And then the following month, we had five again. What's
Yeah.
going on here? And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe we should actually lower our forecast now because we're basing it on information that, we're making incorrect information. So then you go into your forecast and you lower the next few months. And then the next month comes around, boom, we had 10. Well, what's going on? You had 10, great. And then we keep it low until we can prove that, hey, we're actually hitting those numbers. Because we never look at a calendar year. I don't care about a calendar year. I'm always looking at the next 12 months out.
Right.
Calendar is only for taxes, taxes and banks and stuff like that. I'm looking at what I need to do to build that next 10-month runway. And so always looking at that 10-month and you're making those changes, or 12 months. Always, and so you're always making those changes based on that and always looking forward and seeing where you're at. And then as you're going through and you're developing that forecast, because you have a 12-month period in there that's tax period, you'll automatically know what you're going to pay in taxes because it's
Mhm.
pretty simple. If you're forecasting it out, you can kind of see you're going to pay probably 40% of your net income in taxes. Great. Set that money aside in a tax reserve so that you don't spend it. So that those are the different things that you want to do to build that cash reserve, but it all comes with actually building that dynamic forecast. And again, the dynamic forecast drivers are either hours, people, billable. If you're doing a flat fee model, it's jobs, the dollar amount of that job, and the frequency that you're going to be picking those up. Those are the different things, as well as the churn. When do they actually fall off? So those are some of the different factors that you're going to look at, or KPIs you're going to look at when you're developing that forecast.
And what I'm taking from this is it's just so resonant with me, the parallels between what you're sharing and what we would share with an agency with regard to their legal affairs and risk management. This is going to cost you so much less money, and this is going to make you so much more money if you get this system. Because I can hear, I can see in my brain the eyeballs that are rolling right now amongst agency folks listening to us talk about this right now. And look, guys, we understand this is the least sexy part of your business on a day-to-day basis. I mean, legal even less so than accounting and financial, because at least that's money, and most agency owners I know love money. They don't love legal so much. But the point is, these systems and this systemic way of looking at your profitability, your pricing, just like with your legal operations and these are profit-making tools. Your accounting and financial functions are wealth-generating tools. Your legal affairs are wealth-generating tools. Look at them that way, not as expenses or even investments, because they're what not only enable you to keep more of what you make, but also to make more of what you make. And so, um, Jody's taken us on an adventure through pricing, which I think is actually inspiring because it creates a lot of possibilities with this whole lever approach that I hadn't considered previously. And then just a good, strong look through the foundations that you need to be thinking about for the upcoming year, about getting yourself in a position where you can make more proactive decisions about your business because you've got the data in front of you, rather than acting out of fear or reacting out of fear. And so, Jody, I'm grateful to you for walking us through this stuff. This is critical for any business, but at a time like this where things are in such transition in the agency world, I think these are the things we need to be focused on, and maybe crowding out a little bit of the noise that isn't as productive for us,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, yeah.
About the industry. And so, if folks want to know more about what Anders Virtual CFO does or how they might get in touch with you, where are some good places for them to do that?
Yeah, great question. We have so much literature and information out on the web right now.
Yeah.
If you popped in YouTube and just typed in virtual CFO or Summit or Anders, there's going to be a ton of stuff out there that we give away for free just to kind
Mm.
of educate the industry, making sure that, hey, that you guys are all doing things to make your life easier and better.
Yeah.
But if you want to reach out to me directly, you can definitely do it. Send me an email. That's J Grunden, Grunden at anderscpa.com. I'd be happy to hop on a quick call and talk about anything, talk about shop, talk about whatever you want, industry outlook, just to say hi. It doesn't make any difference. And feel free to reach out to me there, or, you can always pop to me on LinkedIn. I'll respond to LinkedIn as well. I know Sharon and I talked about LinkedIn's a great tool to meet business owners, and we meet business owners there all the time. So
Yeah.
either one would be easy to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Thanks all to the rest of you for spending time with us again today. And until the next episode, all of you stay well. Take care, everybody.